Hello and welcome to Millennium News Hour. I am Tanziba Nawreen. In today's bulletin, we will present top and trending news from across the nation and the world. Let's begin with the headlines of the day. Destruction in Texas Panhandle. Storm blamed for 3 deaths. There wrecked mobile homes and Main Street. First Bangladesh origin American becomes US federal judge. US announces sanctions on Mexican migrant trafficking gang. Ex-NYC Mayor de Blasio ordered to pay $475K for misusing public funds on failed White House bid. Man found guilty in Pittsburgh synagogue attack that killed 11. Shooting fire at Tennessee home leads to 6 dead, including 3 children. $930 million in grants announced in Biden's effort to expand internet access to every home in the US. Daniel Ellsberg, who leaked Pentagon papers exposing Vietnam War secrets, dies at 92. At least 15 killed, 10 injured in bus crash in Canada's Manitoba. Cyclone Biparjoy weakens as it churns toward Pakistan after killing 2 in India and causing damage. Putin meets UAE leader, hails ties. Japan raises the age of sexual consent to 16 from 13, which was among the world's lowest. Poverty, climate, regional stability on agenda as Saudi Crown Prince visits France. Pope Francis leaves Rome hospital 9 days after operation. Surgeon says he is better than before. Michael Jordan selling majority ownership stake in Charlotte Hornets. And Swiss cyclist Gino Mather dies after falling down a ravine in the Tour de Suisse. You were listening to headlines, now news in detail. Cleanup efforts continued Friday after severe storms, including some that produced tornadoes, tore across a swathe of southern states, killing at least 5 people as they destroyed hundreds of homes, tossed vehicles into buildings, and left hundreds of thousands without electricity. In Perryton in the Texas Panhandle, Ochiltree County Sheriff Terry Bouchard said 3 people were killed when the tornado struck Thursday afternoon. Another person died Thursday night in the Florida Panhandle when at least one confirmed tornado cut through Escambia County, toppling a tree onto a home. County spokesperson Andy Gibson told the Pensacola News-Journal. Also, a Mississippi man died after a tree fell on him during stormy weather early Friday. Canton Police Chief Oda Brown told WLBT-TV the man was killed after high winds toppled over a tree onto his carport as he was entering his car. In Texas, of the homes searched so far in Perryton, all but one occupant had been accounted for, so the main priority was going back over the area and the debris field to find that person, Perryton Fire Chief Paul Dutcher said on NBC's Today Show. Dutcher estimated that 150 to 200 homes in the community had been destroyed and said that in the downtown area, many storefronts were totally wiped off and buildings had collapsed or partially collapsed. The US Senate on Thursday narrowly confirmed civil rights lawyer Nusrat Chaudhary to the US District Court for the Eastern District of New York, making her the first Bangladeshi American and female Muslim federal judge in the United States. Nusrat, the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois, was confirmed on a 50-49 vote. She will also be the first Bangladeshi American federal judge. Nusrat previously spent most of her professional career with the National ACLU, where she worked on racial justice and national security issues. She was deputy director of the organization's Racial Justice Program from 2018 until 2020. President Joe Biden nominated her to the federal bench in January 2022. Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer, in a statement, said that Nusrat's experience as a talented and dedicated civil rights litigator has prepared her to serve with integrity and professionalism on the federal bench, and she will follow the facts and administer justice with fairness and deep respect for the rule of law. The United States Treasury on Friday announced sanctions on a Mexico-based migrant trafficking gang that supplied asylum seekers with false papers to game the process. Known as the Hernandez Salas organization, the gang is based in the border city of Mexicali, across the border from Calexico, California. Since at least 2018, the gang organized travel by migrants from countries posing national security concerns, according to the Treasury Department, though it did not specify what countries those were. The gang then smuggled the migrants into the United States. The Treasury said in a statement that the criminal scheme hurts those who really need asylum protection. The gang is allegedly run by a woman, Ofelia Hernandez Salas, with links to the Sinaloa drug cartel. The sanctions also applied to 4 associates and 2 hotels used to house migrants. Hernandez Salas is under arrest in Mexico and is awaiting extradition to face U.S. charges. The department said the gang charged migrants between $10,000 and $70,000 for package deals of travel to Mexico, fake documents, and smuggling fees to enter the United States. Former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio was ordered Thursday to pay $475,000 by a city ethics board that found he misused public funds on a police security detail during his failed presidential bid. The hefty fine is the largest ever handed out by New York's Conflicts of Interest Board, capping off a years-long investigation into the two-term mayor's use of taxpayer dollars to cover the travel costs of NYPD officers who accompanied him on cross-country campaign stops. Under the ruling, which he has vowed to appeal, de Blasio, a Democrat, will be forced to reimburse the city for $320,000 spent on the officers' flights, hotels, meals, and rental cars during the 4-month campaign. He will also have to pay a fine of $5,000 for each of the security detail's 31 out-of-state trips, amounting to $155,000. The order was handed down by the Conflicts of Interest Board Chair, Milton Williams, who found that de Blasio plainly violated the city's prohibition on using public resources to advance a political campaign. De Blasio was advised of this rule prior to his campaign, but disregarded the board's advice, Williams wrote in his ruling. In a statement, an attorney for de Blasio, Andrew Gisele Jr., described the ruling as reckless and arbitrary, arguing that recent acts of political violence underscored the security needs of public servants. A man has been found guilty of a hate-fueled 2018 attack on a synagogue in the United States city of Pittsburgh that killed 11 people. The mass shooting on October 2018 at the Tree of Life synagogue represented the deadliest targeting of Jews in U.S. history. The verdict announced on Monday was all but assured after the lawyers for the accused man, truck driver Robert Bowers, conceded at the trial's outset that he attacked and killed worshippers. Bowers was tried on 63 criminal counts, including hate crimes resulting in death and obstruction of the free exercise of religion, resulting in death. He was found guilty on all counts. Prosecutors had previously refused a deal offered by the defense, which would have been the 50-year-old Bowers plead guilty in return for a life sentence. Prosecutors instead opted to take the case to trial and pursue the death penalty. Jurors are set to determine if Bowers should be sentenced to death at a later date. Bowers espoused anti-Jewish rhetoric and is said to have targeted the synagogue based on his belief that Jews were helping immigrants come to the U.S. Prosecutors said that Bowers had posted anti-Jewish content online and shouted, "All Jews must die," when he burst into the synagogue wielding an AR-15 semi-automatic weapon. The majority of those killed were elderly. In closing arguments, prosecutor Mary Hunt described Bowers as filled with hatred for Jews. 6 people, including 3 children, were found dead in a Tennessee home where police responded to a shooting and arrived to find the residence ablaze. Authorities said a 7th person who had suffered gunshot wounds was found alive at the home in Sequatchie on Thursday night after firefighters extinguished the flames and was hospitalized in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation said in a statement. It appeared to be a domestic situation that turned into a murder-suicide, Marion County Sheriff Bo Burnett told WTVC-TV. The person authorities think is responsible is among the deceased, the Bureau said. The sheriff later identified the suspect as Gary Burnett and one of the victims as his estranged wife, Regina Burnett. Court documents obtained by WTVC show a judge granted Regina Burnett an order of no contact against Gary Burnett that was still active after she said he had threatened to shoot her and verbally abused her. He also has anywhere from 50 to 60 guns in his room. "I am afraid he will get drunk and shoot me," she wrote in an affidavit in December. Autopsies on all 6 people will be performed in Nashville. The massive federal effort to expand internet access to every home in the U.S. took a major step forward on Friday with the announcement of $930 million in grants to shore up connections in remote parts of Alaska, rural Texas, and dozens of other places where significant gaps in connectivity persist. The so-called middle mile grants announced by the Department of Commerce are meant to create large-scale networks that will enable retail broadband providers to link subscribers to the internet. Department officials likened the role of the middle mile, the midsection of the infrastructure necessary to enable internet access, composed of high-capacity fiber lines carrying huge amounts of data at very high speeds, to how the interstate highway system forged connections between communities. These networks are the workhorses carrying large amounts of data over very long distances, said Mitch Landrieu, the White House's infrastructure coordinator, in a media Zoom call. They are the ones that are bridging the gap between the larger networks and last-mile connections, from tribal lands to underserved rural and remote areas to essential institutions like hospitals, schools, libraries, and major businesses. Daniel Ellsberg, the history-making whistleblower who, by leaking the Pentagon Papers, revealed long-time government doubts and deceit about the Vietnam War and inspired acts of retaliation by President Richard Nixon that helped lead to his resignation, has died. He was 92. Ellsberg, who announced in February that he was terminally ill with pancreatic cancer, died Friday morning, according to a letter from his family released by a spokeswoman, Julia Passetti. Until the early 1970s, when he revealed that he was the source for the stunning media reports on the 47-volume, 7,000-page Defense Department study of the U.S. role in Indochina, Ellsberg was a well-placed member of the government military elite. He was a Harvard graduate and self-defined Cold Warrior who served as a private and government consultant on Vietnam throughout the 1960s, risked his life on the battlefield, received the highest security clearances, and came to be trusted by officials in Democratic and Republican administrations. Now it's time for global updates. At least 15 people have been killed in central Canada after a truck collided with a small bus carrying a group of mostly elderly people in one of the most deadly road accidents in years. The crash occurred at the junction of two major roads near the town of Carberry in southwestern Manitoba, 170 km west of Winnipeg. The bus passengers had been on their way to a casino in Carberry, CBC News reported, citing a casino spokesperson. We have been able to establish that at least 15 people have been confirmed deceased as a result of this collision, said Assistant Commissioner Rob Hill, who commands the Manitoba Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The bus had been carrying about 25 people, and police said 10 people were being treated in hospital. Police said the drivers of both vehicles were alive and declined to say who might have been responsible for the crash. TV broadcasters aired images of what looked like a large van or bus smoldering in a ditch near a truck with a smashed engine on a road. The road was littered with debris, broken glass, a large bumper, and what looked like a walking aid. Blue and yellow tarpaulins were also stretched out. In a tweet, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he sent his deepest condolences to those who lost loved ones today, and I'm keeping the injured in my thoughts. I cannot imagine the pain those affected are feeling, he said. Cyclone Biparjoy knocked out power and threw shipping containers into the sea in western India on Friday, before weakening as it headed toward Pakistan, officials said. More than 180,000 people took shelter in the two countries, but some of Pakistan's evacuees prepared to return home as the storm weakened. Indian officials said electricity had been restored in some villages, while many others were still without power. The storm's toll was felt especially where it made landfall in India. A man and his son died when they tried to save their livestock in Gujarat state. The storm had wind speeds of 85 kph and gusting up to 105 kph through the coastal regions of western Gujarat. The full extent of the damage in western India wasn't immediately known. In addition to the two deaths, 23 people were injured in various areas, officials said. About 100,000 people who were evacuated in western India have been temporarily relocated to relief camps, authorities said. The storm did other damage upon landfall, including uprooting trees and electricity poles. Officials in the coastal town of Manvi said heavy winds threw some shipping containers into the sea at the Mundra port, one of India's largest. President Vladimir Putin hailed Russia's ties with the United Arab Emirates yesterday as he met the leader of the oil-rich nation, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, in St. Petersburg. The Emirates are a very good partner, Putin said in televised comments at the start of the meeting, which took place on the sidelines of an economic summit in Russia's second city. Putin thanked Al Nahyan for the role the UAE has played in prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine and Russia and the United States. Al Nahyan said he was in favor of de-escalation and a political solution to the Ukraine conflict during the talks, in which the pair discussed their country's strategic partnership, according to the UAE official news agency WAM. Russia and UAE have closely cooperated as members of the OPEC Plus oil alliance, and Dubai is one of the rare world capitals to have maintained direct flights to Moscow following the start of the Ukraine conflict in February 2022. Japan's parliament on Friday raised the age of sexual consent to 16 from 13, a limit which had remained unchanged for more than a century and was among the world's lowest, amid calls for greater protection of children and women. The revision was part of a revamping of laws related to sex crimes. Separately, Parliament passed a new law on Friday to increase awareness of LGBTQ+ issues, which activists criticized for not guaranteeing equal rights for sexual minorities. Reforms providing greater protection for victims of sexual crimes and stricter punishment of assailants have come slowly in a country where the legislative and judicial branches have long been dominated by men. Japan in 2017 revised its criminal code on sexual crimes for the first time in 110 years. A series of acquittals in cases of sexual abuse and growing instances of sexual images taken of girls and women without their consent have triggered public outrage, prompting the new revisions. The changes enacted Friday make sexual intercourse with someone below age 16 considered rape. They specify 8 scenarios of consentless sex crimes, a new term for forced sexual intercourse, including being assaulted under the influence of alcohol or drugs, fear, or intimidation. They also ban the filming, distribution, and possession of sexually exploitative images taken without consent. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met Friday with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris as part of an official visit, during which he will also participate in a global financing summit aimed at fighting poverty and climate change. Macron and the prince sat down for a one-to-one working lunch at the Elysee Presidential Palace. The French presidency said the talks would focus on bilateral relations between the two countries and on regional stability issues, especially after long-time rivals Saudi Arabia and Iran restored diplomatic ties earlier this year. France is a major weapons and defense supplier to Gulf nations. The leaders also are preparing for a global summit next week aimed at bringing together private and public funding to fight poverty, support climate transition, and protect biodiversity, the French presidency said. The event is expected to gather over 50 heads of states and governments, as well as many NGOs and prominent climate activists. Pope Francis was discharged Friday from the Rome hospital, where he underwent abdominal surgery to repair a hernia and remove scarring from previous operations, with his surgeon saying the pontiff was better than before his 9-day hospitalization. Francis left through Gemelli Polyclinic's main exit in a wheelchair, smiling and waving and saying thanks to a crowd of well-wishers. He stood up to get into the small Vatican car awaiting him. In the brief distance before reached the white Fiat 500, reporters thrust microphones toward his face. The Pope seemed to bat the mics away good-naturedly. Still alive, Francis quipped when asked how he was doing. As he smiled and shook hands, his face looked wan and thinner than usual. When a reporter asked for a comment about the sinking of a crowded migrant boat of Greece that claimed dozens of lives and left hundreds missing, he replied, "So much sorrow." Dr. Sergio Alfieri, the surgeon who performed the pontiff's 3-hour operation on June 7, was outside the hospital along with the surging crowd as Francis exited. "The Pope is well, he is better than before," Alfieri told reporters after he said goodbye to Francis and the pontiff got into the car. Following the surgery and his recuperation, Francis will be stronger, the doctor said. Now it's time for business news. Today's New York stock close price is 15,795.12. The NYSE Composite is decreased by 31.23 points or 0.20%. Tokyo stock close price is 33,706.08. The Nikkei 225 index is decreased by 220.59 points or 0.66%. Shanghai stock close price is 3,273.33. The Shanghai index is increased by 20.36 points or 0.63%. Hong Kong stock close price is 20,040.37. The Hang Seng Index is increased by 211.45 points or 1.07%. Bombay stock close price is 63,384.58. The Sensex index is increased by 466.95 points or 0.74%. Let's have a look on today's sports stories. Michael Jordan is finalizing a deal to sell the majority share of the Charlotte Hornets. The franchise announced Friday, leaving the 30-team NBA without any black majority ownership. Jordan is selling to a group led by Gabe Plotkin and Rick Chanel, the Hornets said. Plotkin has been a minority stakeholder in the Hornets since 2019. Chanel has been a minority owner of the Atlanta Hawks since 2015 and is in the process of selling his investment in that team. It's not clear how long the process of selling will take to be finalized by the NBA's Board of Governors. Jordan plans to keep a minority stake in the Hornets, the team he bought in 2010 for about $275 million. Jordan's decision to sell ends his unsuccessful 13-year run overseeing the organization. Swiss cyclist Gino Mader died Friday, one day after crashing and falling down a ravine during a descent at the Tour de Suisse. The 26-year-old Mader crashed after a left-hand turn on a fast downhill road approaching the end of the mountainous fifth stage into La Pente. His fall of about 30 meters was stopped by a stream. Medical staff who reached Mader found him motionless in the water, race organizers said Thursday. CPR was performed on him before he was airlifted to the hospital. Police in the Swiss canton of Graubünden said a joint investigation with prosecutors wanted to hear from witnesses who might have seen and filmed the incident. The Tour de Suisse is a preparation race for next month's Tour de France. Mader's death was announced about 30 minutes before the scheduled start of the sixth stage in the 8-day race. The start was delayed and riders gathered in a silent tribute before the stage was cancelled. The peloton rode together in tribute to Mader for the final 30 kilometers of Friday's scheduled route. The race should resume Saturday. Let's have a look on today's weather forecast. That's all in today's news. Keep watching Millennium News 24 for latest update. Millennium TV US and Millennium News 24 network is transmitted and available to be watched free for all at TVs such as Sony, Samsung, LG, Roku TV, Amazon TV and Apple TV. And also in all European countries and Australia, available with the Sky Network, Worldwide Jago TV, Radiant IPTV, Worldwide Jago BD Network and Horizon Satellite globally. Stay connected with us for all types of informative and entertainment program. Thank you.